The struggle for the second liberation that sent Kenyans to the trenches culminated in the famous historical meeting at the historical Kamukunji grounds that finally ushered in the first multi-party elections in 1992 after a long spell from the period of independence. 30 or so years, we find ourselves going back to Kamukunji. Raila Odinga and his Azimio people have called for a people's conversation at that famous historical Kamukunji place. The question, therefore, on the lips of those who follow political events in this country, and indeed that should occupy the minds of those in the political power, is whether this Kamukunji meeting will be successful from the perspective of Raila Odinga, or whether it will be so huge as to worry those in power, as indeed it not only worried President Daniel Arap Moi, but forced him into the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution that had made Kenya a one-party state by law. To those who may dismiss this coming Kamukunji, as indeed I have heard people dismiss, I have the following to say. First, the historical context, evoking the Constitution, evoking the history, bringing back to life the period 1990-1991, is itself enough reason to worry those in power. History has a way of playing out that when an important moment in the history of our people, moments such as those moments that change the direction and the course of history, when these moments are brought back to help the people face existing challenges, they never count for naught. When our people are under attack, and the collective memory and history of the people is invoked, the people get the spirit to fight. And that is why the earliest communities that used writing, the earliest inventions about writing, were on matters of survival, such as the seasons in Egypt, in particular, the flooding of the river Nile, on which the Egyptians depended. Other forms of writings were to capture successes in war. And that is what I'm talking about. That throughout history, when nations and societies, kingdoms and empires are faced with huge challenges like a huge war, they draw from the history to give them the courage to fight. So those who may dismiss Raila bringing to life the Saba then do not understand history. They do not understand our history. Saba was a turning moment in the history of the struggle of this country for good governance, for democracy, for human rights. And therefore, we must ask ourselves, on that score alone, don't we agree that Saba will succeed? Indeed it will. And from where I stand, we ought to be worried. Beyond being concerned as a people, we ought to be worried. Beyond the history, Saba will succeed because of the situation in the country. Kenyans are hungry and angry. Kenyans feel betrayed because the promises that were given by the current regime have not been fulfilled. None of them. On the contrary, the government has become oblivious to the suffering of Kenyans. The government has become insensitive. Government continues to put measures and policies in place, the latest being the budget, the Finance Act, that imposes further suffering on the people of Kenya through taxation. The government intends to bring more pain on the payslip of working Kenyans through increased deductions for NHIF, NSSF, housing levy already, which is low, housing tax. This makes the people extremely angry. What does that mean? It means that unlike in the past, when people turned out in huge numbers to demonstrate for mass action, they turned out because they have been called to action by their leaders. The difference between then and now, and this is for the attention of the leadership of this country, the difference between then and now is people are not turning out for their leaders. The people who will go to Kamukunji will not go because of Raila Odinga, not because of Martha Karua, Jeremiah Kioni, or Maula Kijana, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. No. The people who will go to Kamukunji will go because of their own suffering, because of their own pain. They'll go for themselves. Therein lies the danger that I've talked about before, and I wish to repeat. First, let me use what Raila said. And this should concern the leadership of this country. Raila said, when they called for the Kamukunji meeting, the famous Kamukunji meeting, a few days before that, they were arrested. Charles Rubia, ndani. Ken Matiba, ndani. Raila Amolo Odinga, ndani. On top of harassing other leaders. But Raila said that the meeting nevertheless took place. We all remember the iconic image of Martin Shikuku and James Orengo on that pickup defying the police. The people were able to go there despite their leaders being arrested. Today it is worse because the people will go there, not because of their leaders, because of themselves. Something else that I draw the attention of the leadership of this country. Kamukunji marked the beginning of serious defiance. If you play back what happened on that day, the people were able to defy the police physically, break through the barricades, march through the tear gas, and walk to Kamukunji. That is the danger we face as a people. Lastly, drawing from what I've just said, when the people themselves choose to exercise the anger, move into action without even the leaders, we are staring danger into its eyes. The history of mass action or civil strife, of disobedience, of civil war will teach us one thing. Whenever the leadership is absent, it becomes difficult to control the masses, the insurgents, the warring factions. A good example is Central African Republic. When the people can on their own organize themselves into resistance, into mass action, into warring factions, including being warriors, the country is in great danger. Because it's always easy for a leader to moderate the struggle. I've given an example. Because of the anger in the country, because of the pain, because of the suffering, because of the obvious impunity from the leaders, on the one hand, you are taxing people badly because you need money. On the other hand, you are engaged in excesses of using that money and of the scandals of billions of shillings. Impunity. As you punish the people through measures to raise money through taxes and levies, SRC now comes up with a proposal to increase the salaries of state officers from the president downwards. It is like you are eating and buttoning your shirt and showing the people your bulging tummy. And within no time you are vomiting on their shoes. Food you have eaten from their taxes. I want to alert the leadership of this country, that is both opposition and government, that we are playing with danger. Kamukunji may not just be successful, but it may mark the beginning of the end of this country as we know it. Those who think it is just another meeting, you can demonstrate because roads are there, you can put sufurias on your heads, I want to invite them to look at history, including our very own history. That when people consciously identify their problems, consciously, and worse still, pair those problems with the people causing them, then, as history has demonstrated, disaster is in the making. Throughout history, all the epoch-making changes, all the historical changes that have taken place in the world, all the revolutionary changes in the world happen because people get to a point where they are conscious of their problems and express that consciousness. At that time, unless those in power read the times and begin to manage the change, they will be swept by the currents of history into oblivion. Unfortunately for us, in unstable societies like ours, that could also spell doom and mark the end of the state as we know it. And therefore I invite all that are in charge in this country, from both sides of the political divide, not to handle these things casually, and to know, just like the Kamukunji of 31, 32 years ago, 35 years ago, this Kamukunji may not just mark the turning point in the history of this country, in the development of this country, but it could also spell doom to the existence of this country. And because I know you love your country and your children and their children, do everything within your power, if you are a leader in this country, to avoid situations such as the ones we are walking in with our eyes open.